So now for another weird game from my childhood that I never finished. And in a bizarre fucking turn, it's actually a children's game. I actually played a few games aimed at kids growing up.
Stop!
It's a Capcom-made anime-styled 3D brawler, and a potential toy line should everything take off, which it didn't. It got a cult following, but let's put it this way, I will be surprised if anyone from this game turns up in Infinite. I do still have a GameCube copy of this game somewhere, but this review is running on an emulator. It's more than accurate enough. A recent video posted by the Dolphin devs proudly points out that even glitches are emulated properly now. If you want to get your hands on a copy, best of luck, it's become a little bit pricey. So, what's Gotcha Force got going for it? Well, it's got over 200 collectible and playable fighters. And that is the main appeal and thrust of Gotcha Force. There are trading and battling options. All of this can be a great strength, you know, building teams, trading with friends. It encourages you to play more than if it's entirely solo. Makes it social, kinda like Pokemon. It's also one of the best fish tanks I've ever seen. Gotcha Force, however, is a console game. It's not portable. You know, this came out in the early 2000s, you'd be surprised to see this on a GBA. It only had one version with no exclusive boards, which to be fair I consider a good thing. But all of this does stymie the social aspect somewhat. Particularly in my case, as I only had one friend with a GameCube, and he thought Gotcha Force was okay but not worth buying, and the next logical step of that was not buying it. Now, I do occasionally buy games that I know I'll dislike, but most people, friend included, tended not to. I'm likely the idiot here. Plus, between this, Boiling Point and Gangland, this is the game that I've come back to the most often. I'd think, hey, it was interesting enough, it's remembered fondly, and I wonder what kind of fighters I'll get this time. I'd play for an hour, put it down, and stop. And I'm not sure why, it wasn't out of dislike, I'd just stop. Give it a few years and more recently every few months and this process would repeat. So I decided to review this game partially to induce completion, to make myself focus on getting past that hour mark and to the end. We open on some robots sprinting off to bolt some shit to a kid's desk. God, the parents are going to be pissed off. Like I said, we're in here for the story mode, which is pulling double duty, as it's also the grind mode where we can unlock new fighters. It opens with our protagonist, a young and as of yet unnamed boy living in Safari Town. Late one night there's a shower of lights over town, with one crashing down into the nearby hills. Being a patient kid, he waits until the next day, not just that, until after school, and runs off to find out what happened. And seeing as the whole town consists of several children, no one else got there first. What he finds is the rest of an anime OP, one of the slowest and most awkwardly animated OPs you could ask for. Still technically a competent OP, however, as it does manage to spoil a lot of what's incoming. We'll have another animation about 10 hours from now when it ends, as a visual novel style takes over. The kid came here in search of adventure, and what he found was exposition, delivered by mascot unit G-Red.
A boy went in search of it, hoping to find an adventure.
These robots are called Borgs, and then an evil bunch of Borgs came along, the Death Force, led by the presumptuously named Galactic Emperor. They destroy the Borg home planet, and the Borgs leave and head to Earth. The Borgs are powered by someone believing in them, and kids will overlook the fact that they've already failed once. Either that or there was no one, and how the fuck did anything get done up until now? Did the Galactic Emperor win just because he wanted it more? Anyway, some stick figures turn up representing the Death Force, and are quickly curb-stomped by G-Red. And with that, G-Red and the kid decide to team up and form the Gotcha Force. Despite that... No. He is not telling his name to weird little robots. That's not what I meant. Then a title card pops up and spoils that G-Red will get a sword at some point. So the first call of the Gotcha Force is... well, take a guess. Gotcha catch 'em all! Fuck, I hate myself. Oh, also get some allies and do battle to build up that GF energy, confidence, believe in Jesus, red power. We wander to Kakeru's house. Some kid who's our best friend, I guess? He doesn't know our name. He did find a Gotcha Borg, however, so he's in. Kakeru and his Borg both suck, and he's beaten pretty handily. I'm sorry mate, but I stumbled upon protagonist bot. We can't all win in this lottery. It's pointed out that we're a transfer student, which is a pointless detail that adds nothing, but it does aid my own bit of made-up lore. And then Kakeru lets us wander blindly across this new town. This map screen is obviously our mission select, and lucky for us and no, it's highly segmented. The Death Force will only attack these strategic locations, and so we spend a little while wandering around, training with Kakeru, saving some other kid called Mana, the one useful ally we'll get. We go toe-to-toe with neighborhood bully Nekobe and his personal suck-up Kitsune a few times. One-on-one? Oh, alright then.
You'll pay for this, Kitsune!
Yes, Katsumi?
Oh, you sneaky fuck. And that's one of the most interesting battle swerves this game has, and it was used up in Hour 1. You're bullies, aren't you? Just punch some kids in the face. Don't bully by proxy. I mean, I can see Kitsune doing it because he's a coward. Nekobe, you don't really have an excuse, you're low tier. The actual amount of, well, story in this story mode is minimal. It seems to mostly forget about it and have long periods of non-stop battling. Some games can get away with this, but with Gotcha Force, calling it a story mode feels more than a little bit dishonest. My run of the story had 136 battles, and despite what it looks like, there are actually about 15 maps in total. That's still a pretty small pool, and it does get very repetitive, but for what it is worth, I do like the stages. I've always had a soft spot for rat-style maps, seeing a mundane environment from a shrunk-down perspective, and I think it can lead to a lot of interesting gameplay situations. These stages do have a degree of verticality and blocking, so that you can use cover here and there and get above and below opponents. It does mix up the battles for a little while, but it does not hold off boredom forever. After a few more scrapes going around busting kids' toys, very poorly directed and written kids at that,
Hey!
I beat you in a battle. What is that line getting at? We come across Orochi, a gotcha commander under the thumb of the Galactic Emperor, and really obviously mind-controlled. Defeating her floods the whole town with Death Force. This is going to take a while. So, the biggest strength in this game, and indeed the best thing about it. This game is a kitchen sink. If you can fight it, you can fight as it. It's not 200 entirely different characters, more like several groups of characters, with some distinction there when it comes to their health limits, attack types, and movement. And at least 20 slots are given over to numbered variants of generic Deathborgs. It's still a good variety, however. Cowboys, ninjas, Valkyries, martial artists, spies, robots, transformers, cars, planes, tanks, soldiers, samurai, witches, knights, divers, and more. They start off as sort of normal, and then they get gimmicked, and many bring new attacks to the table, and in the case of the more magically inclined, status effects. But to make the game actually makeable, the combat has been rendered very simplistic and almost modular to compensate. It's a 3D fighter where you are always locked onto enemies. All movement is therefore relative to wherever your opponent is, and depending on what both sides are playing as, the combat can go from sort of slow-paced to decently quick. Fighters have about 2 to 5 attacks, most average out at about 3, typically a ranged shot, a melee attack or a combo string, and a gimmick attack, perhaps with a charge move accompanying or making up either button, as this is a 2-button fighter. So the ranged attack and combo string are sharing a room, and there is not enough space. Meanwhile, the gimmick move has its own button. It's a little bit unfair to call this the gimmick move or gimmick button, but in any case, X is where the gimmicks always reside, should there be one. X may just be harbouring a stronger version of a regular attack. You also have a super mode earned by doing damage. It's a temporary buff to speed, making you move faster, shoot faster, and near removing charge and reload times. Enemies too can do this, and during some battles it feels like they can activate it at will. Anyway, what this all means is that Gotcha Force is not about mind games or input and combo memorization. It's more about dodging, keeping an optimal distance while putting your enemy out of theirs, and counter-picking. If you're better in melee, keep rushing. If you're a ranged fighter, never ever stop moving and mashing fire. It's incredibly straightforward, to the point of being rather limiting actually. It doesn't stop it from being fun for a while. It looks flashy, it's frantic and over the top. It cuts to a side on camera for the big hits, well, the same big hits each time, which definitely just leads to annoyance and disorientation. Plus, it doesn't have the impact to back up its flashiness. It does not feel like metal is clashing. I never once felt like I'd actually landed a hit in this game, even as the enemies went flying across the stage. Just a weak spark sound effect and a momentary flash. Am I jetpack punching a dragon, or am I just sliding past him? Now, I will say again that this is a game aimed at kids. I don't mind simplistic gameplay. Simple gameplay can still have decision-making and options, and even if lacking, I'll take simple gameplay if it makes up for it with sufficient catharsis or spectacle. Gotcha Force kind of has options in a fight. With the number of fighters, it definitely suggests it, but the fighting itself has a ton of flaws that start off as a little annoying, but gradually become bigger and bigger. Eventually the game did become a mindless slog, and the longer you get into story mode, the longer the fights become. They can go on for 5 minutes, maybe longer. And all of the subsystems that feed into the fight, both in the story mode and otherwise, have their own share of flaws that lead to some annoyances which should have been easily avoided. Alright, I cleared the town. So, did anyone even notice? No fanfare at all. I mean, I didn't expect No's parents to dive out of the bushes with the Borg he wanted for Christmas, but the game has just drunkenly stumbled forwards, dropping in more battles as though it's the man playing darts with the map. Clearing the town really didn't matter. It's weird, this game has less story than I actually expected, and way more padding than I could ever have wanted. Anyway, I'm annoyed, so let's get into more combat flaws as we just keep battling. Eventually something will happen. Eventually something must happen. Battles in this game can have 2 participants per side, in your case fielding 1 Borg, and for enemy AI, however many they feel like. Most of the time you can pick a teammate to bring with, at other times this is decided for you, or you're on your own. However, no matter what, even if it's just you and 1 enemy stickman on the field, every battle will be at least 3-on-1 as you find yourself fighting with the controls and the camera. The constant lock-on starts off as annoying and only gets worse. It denies a ton of situational awareness, as you can't even tilt the camera left and right to check what other enemies are doing while keeping focus on another. The GameCube control does have a C-stick, but it's not used in-game, just in menus. The game uses pop-ups to try and mitigate this, but due to differing projectile speeds for the many different kinds of enemies throughout, and of course melee attacks, it really doesn't fix the problem. This combat style is best suited for one-on-ones, and for most of the story, you're not fighting one-on-one. You're not fighting 2-on-2 even, you're fighting more enemies than you've got allies. This camera is worse on the hillier stages or the more closed off areas. It's not impossible to navigate since most characters can basically fly, but it makes getting around the level more irritating than it needs to be, as your vision remains glued to the enemy, even through walls. Plus, I grew to hate this lock-on entirely. I am not aiming. I am not making informed or calculated attacks. Sometimes my shots will veer wildly off course due to the strafing randomly stopping and becoming an actual turn, and then my character will take a second to correct, and I'll just start mashing B again. I'm whittling enemies down, just waiting for them to stop moving so a few shots will land and move us closer to a conclusion. The battles are just matters of hoping they lose all of their health before I do. I can't aim ahead of them. Even if I could veer off the lock-on in such a way, I'll get snapped back when I start firing. This game, if nothing else, is a good way to introduce new players to circle strafing, because that's the name of the game. On that note, the controls themselves are ridiculously stiff. You have 2 movement speeds, a slow run, or dashing all over the sodding place. And jetpack and flying characters dash even harder. And to get into slow movement, you've got to slowly build up the analog, or else dash once, then stop, and your character will slowly start back up into a run. So I am constantly mashing sideways, because standing still is a stupid idea. I tried to time my mashing in such a way that I can move and shoot at the same time and not stop aiming at the enemy, and the enemy is most likely doing the same thing. So we're just randomly flying all over the place, hoping to hit the other guy. All of this does lead to the awkward melee combat. It's a bit better, a bit more dependent on character due to differing melee ranges, but for the most part I'd overshoot getting into melee distance for everyone except G-Red. The fact that your shoot attack becomes melee in this range also means good fucking luck retreating. At times I tried to turn around and make some distance, hit the button and hope to shoot on the way out, and G-Red would get really pissed, spin back around, and typically swing at the fucking air. I lost some Borgs thanks to this. So, the long-range combat is 2 people who've never played Space Invaders and learned about leading shots, and the melee combat is a slippery mess. Sure, you can do the slow jog to try and close the gap a bit more assuredly, but you'll most likely get shot for trying. What started as a small annoyance and grew to be my most hated part of the game was how knockdown is handled. Knockdown is very frequent for one thing. This game is high action, there are explosions, laser beams, big showy strikes, so naturally knockdown is not just knockdown. Enemies and yourself will get sent barreling across the stage. This can even be caused by consistent damage from small shots. During this time, you are invulnerable until you get back up and resume control. This invulnerability, combined with the distance enemies are sent and the time it takes for them to get back up, well, it slows down fights a lot. This leads to so much empty space, where one half can't really do anything, and the other half can really just move, not really do anything interesting. I mean, if another enemy is in the match and still up, you can go send them flying, I suppose. Not always an option, but there you go. This hurts melee characters more than ranged ones. Occasionally you can keep on top of them and you won't knock them too far away. Other times, you will blow them to their optimal distance and you'll have to close the gap all over again. Which, as we've already gone over, can be a bit of a pain. It also meant that super mode was mostly wasted, because I can knock shit down faster, but it will get up just as slowly. This does also mean there are knockdown loops. Some of the more annoying enemy types, such as spearmen or enemies with instant laser attacks, can just make staying on your feet, or even approaching them to get into optimal range, a fucking nightmare, since approaching diagonally is only a slight help. And due to the fact that you'll be dashing all of the time, turning in midair is fucking painful. You may think that these complaints relate to only one or two Borgs. Well, a little bit. Some Borgs are a little bit better, and others a whole lot worse. I did gain some favourites, and a few that I dropped pretty quickly. Some early game difficulty can come down to the leniency of the RNG. Cowboy and ninja type Borgs are generally dreadful, and early on, you are far more likely to get handed these buggers. I don't like how limited my influence over what I get is. If you defeat an enemy, you have a small chance to receive it post-fight, and shittier Borgs have a higher drop rate. There's no Borg grinder machine where I can sacrifice the weak and the duplicates to their god for a better one. No currency in Borg shop. Oh yeah, I beat down some tanks made of drills, slaughtered a dragon. What have you got for me? A fucking normal ninja. From what I have read, this RNG does build up, even over multiple New Game Pluses. Near the start I was getting a drop every few fights. It was a slow drip of mostly weak, uninteresting Borgs, and some duplicates due to a small enemy pool. Nearing the end of the game I could get 2 or 3 Borgs a fight, and it was rare I'd go a fight without getting anything, and the greater variety of enemies meant that my odds of getting something new increased. There are also crystals. I have little to say about them. You need to collect 2 to 4 of the same type of crystal to get 1 Borg. Perhaps the rarer Borgs are locked behind them? Perhaps there's a Borg that requires getting 10 of the same crystal to get it? I believe I got 3 crystal fusions during my playthrough, so I have to admit I can only really speculate as to whether this is a way to stretch out an already slow RNG, or if they have more purpose than I got to actually witness. The most I can say is that I have to get several of the same random drops in a game where I cannot influence my random drops. Now, I don't know if you can trade crystals, but if you can, I guess this could be aided by others, but I'm going to have to admit ignorance in this regard. While Borgs do feel distinct, those within the same category are also very similar. Like I said, the gameplay feels very modular. To me, the most important difference for any humanoid or robotic Borg became their jump type, followed closely by how fast they could shoot. Jetpacks for the shoot bangs and multi-jumps for melee, with flying Borgs handling better than both, but generally being weaker. Jetpacks let me move faster, and jumping was less unwieldy, and therefore slightly better for melee. Planes had the worst controls of them all. One analog stick handles turning, pitch and yaw, with the jump becoming a boost button. You combine all this with the ever-present lock-on, and I've got a fun fact for you. This is the one class in the game I got with manual aiming. Oh dear. If there is a plane with auto-aim, I did not get it, but it rendered the 2 I did get nigh uncontrollable. If I want to hit something, I have to nosedive towards it, and that isn't gonna fly. Tanks are hilarious. Due to the fact they don't get sent flying as often, they are actually easier to destroy and take more damage as they are forced to tank the hits. When in my hands, tanks are slow, unwieldy, inaccurate, and they did not have the health or damage output to make up for this. I got 1 car and it had an auto turret, so it basically meant instead of hitting dash repeatedly, I could just hold a direction and fire. It made the combat even more thoughtless than it already was. There is a scuba diver who swims in a sphere of flying water. I like the concept, even if I have no idea what he's good at. And because I'm stumbled, He wasted it. The amount of status effects on hands is impressive, even if I'm not a big fan of all of them. An archer that can really pin things down. A mage that turns you into a cockroach. There's the music mage. A mage that makes you smaller, which only really helps. And one that makes you bigger. It's imaginative, at the least. Even if I got caught in cockroach loops that made one battle far longer than it needed to be.
Is this some kind of joke?
Going down.
Several boards I do have specific complaints about, but it does go to show that with this many, a few are going to be interesting ideas poorly executed. Spinner Girl is god-awful. She's a melee-focused character with a chain yo-yo thing, but due to her tiny melee range and jetpack controls, actually closing the distance with her is nigh impossible. Her ranged backup attack is also slow and it locks her in place, so an enemy can put you out of her misery. Chainsaw Knight has a chainsword and a slow movement speed. To compensate, he has a grapnel used to keep enemies close as you cut them to ribbons. His health is pathetic, rendering him a big, slow, lumbering wet newspaper with a rope. Borgs can level up, I saw that much with G-Red, but it was a slow process and the effects were decidedly minor. Okay, I'm gonna have to start complaining about whole classes. They're close enough in gameplay that you can tar everyone with the same brush, I'm afraid. At least in a few cases. The entirety of the gunman class is worthless. Worse than anything with a machine gun. Too weak in both health and damage output, shite melee. They exist to be cheap, disposable padding. Melee Borgs in general are not as good as the ranged fighters. A ranged fighter is near good against everything, supposing they're mobile enough and not gunmen. Due to enemy variety, a melee character is weak against most of the roster. Planes, helicopters, airships, winged Valkyries, they're weak against the hardest enemy in the game, which are satellites, surprisingly enough. I didn't see that coming myself. Why do satellites and airships stumble? Some melee characters do get a weak ranged move, but it does not begin to make up for the fact that they're basically gimped in a game where a similar rock, paper, scissors weakness does not exist for flying or ranged characters capable of moving at a half-decent clip. You see, this is why we moved on from knights. Nukes. Support Borgs are useless in story mode due to a lack of co-op play. I'm not helping my allies. They're here to take the heat off of me. There is co-op in challenge mode, where I found out support Borgs are still useless, since 2 people murdering is faster than 1. The challenge mode is 3 difficulties. These are not randomly generated battles, they're always the same in the same order, and you don't get anything out of it. Imagine an arcade mode that you don't want to play. By the way, this is the same friend from my childhood who was formerly lukewarm. He now dislikes the game. We didn't even play it for that long, we put like 40 minutes in. Dragons are the most boring enemy in the game. Slow, pitiful, non-threatening bullet sponges. They do have an instant kill move, but it's pretty easily dodged. And even if you get killed, it's just one Borg. G-Red is the Borg I ended up using the most. Call me boring, but he was an all-rounder. I also used Magnet Bot, because he was an all-rounder. And I used Battle Girl, and Wire Gunner, and Ring Valkyrie, because they were all all-rounders. Gimmicky blokes I used once to see what's up, realised it was worthless against roughly everything, except maybe one thing, and I went back to what would work no matter what was thrown at it. You would not install a lead wall in your house because it's great against radiation. Granted, I love Copy Man. Low HP, but it meant I could headbutt my way to trying out Borgs I'd yet to unlock. He can't copy airships, but I could headbutt my way to tank them. G-Red became even more MVP. After some more post-town clearing battles, we eventually end up at the Death Force base. G-Red finds some data there that powers him up to Neo G-Red, gaining a sword, more health, and costing more GF energy.
Woo!
And that's where building a force comes in. I like the menu for it. I've got plentiful slots for different teams, and I can organise everything how I like. It notes if a bot is in use for a certain team, and I can name all of my own forces. Plus, all of the Borgs have a stat and bio menu, and god, most of these bios are useless or completely lacking in flavour, or both. There isn't much to work with lore-wise. Borgs have different costs, and as you win battles you build GF energy, which lets you field larger forces, with certain battles giving a good injection of points. I ended the campaign with nearly 2,000, which is about enough to field 5 to 6 good troops, or about 12 bad ones. Or 2 bad ones if you just put dragons in there. There is little reason to field gimmick teams, unless being good at everything is a gimmick. My feudal force, gun shooters, cannon fodder, samurai flim-flam, and especially the stabbers are feeling that pain. Meanwhile, the for some reason name remove G unit did pretty well. Sometimes you will enter a battle from the map with a rough hint of what the enemy will comprise of, and sometimes the hint is useless. Mr. Reverse Bolt. What does that even mean? It's just a bunch of plant mages. It said Mr. Reverse Bolt, not Bill and Ben the fucking flower pot men. Sometimes it just says Dev Force Battle, and whatever you're up against is for you to discover as you go along. I learned what other characters used pretty quickly, so I could at least predict them. Alright, let's bust out some of the melee troops, and we're up against... aircraft. I feel like a World War I general at times playing this. It's not a good feeling. I mean, sure, I could quit and go back in, but even then, these pop-ups only tell me the first thing I will face. It's no guarantee that after the first wave they won't start fielding samurai and battle girls. The challenge mode does tell you everything you'll face, but because it's multiple battles in a row without the ability to switch between fights, I'm not going to give it any credit. All of No's mates went for gimmick teams, and therefore, they are by and large useless. After we get Neo G-Red, the town music changes, and rather than a battle filler arc, we're now in a calm filler arc. It's a ton of training. Here is where characterization could have happened, but ultimately didn't. What's my name, Kakeru? We also faced off against Sho and Orochi at points. They are two evil commanders.
It's time for a showdown.
Well, okay, Sho might just be edgy. It's unclear. Battles listed as tough stuff can be failed. This has marginal plot effects. Meanwhile, main missions can be repeated indefinitely until completion. With no loss to GF energy, they never lose confidence. Now, despite being calm filler, it's still just battling, only now against neighbourhood kids rather than genocidal monsters. Most of the time. They're a bunch of one-note kids who decided to embrace that fact of life, and thus the aforementioned theme teams. I was wondering if I just insulted myself, but I realised that I'm at least 10-note. Kakeru is best friend character. Usagi is competitive, everyone hates Nekobei. I mean, he is a bully.
What can I do for you?
But what a polite young man. Kitsune is Nekobei's suck-up.
If you oppose Katsumi, you'll regret it.
Tetsuya is... I don't remember. Tsutomu is a nerd.
There's gotta be a more efficient way.
Met's a military brat. Mana is...
Please help me.
Meek.
Mana?
You're evil.
Judgmental? I think the vocal director was trying to get out a lot quicker than he actually did. Here is Mana, angry that one of her Borgs has been taken down.
Why you?
It's not just off, the intonation is wrong. Is she questioning? Oh, why would this be the one to defeat me? Every single line of dialogue in this game is delivered wrong. It's kind of impressive. I mean, I am guessing these are actually kid actors. But honestly, there are so many stops along the way when it comes to recording, editing, and inputting audio, that it's not really their fault. It's a lot of people's fault. G-Red is the only Borg with mid-battle dialogue.
You forgot something. Good. Set the name on it. Destroy. Yeah. You're finished.
Our hero, everyone.
Woo!
I also suspect a coke problem. Anyway, I'm sorry, but none of that was important. You won't remember them by character, but by their Borgs. It's a good moral lesson for kids. Pick your friends by their toys. So, Mana is the only good one because she has support Borgs. The rest have combat Borgs and they're not very good with them. Now, you can't actually command allies, so you pick her and hope she'll decide to heal you. This is a minor problem, but reveals a bigger and obvious issue. So much so that it feels like an oversight. The order of your force is more or less important because you can't swap Borgs mid-battle. One has to get KO'd for the next to come in. Why can't I tag out? The D-pad isn't in use. Just adding the ability to switch out would expand the game a ton. And I can promise, this would not be too taxing for Kiddlywinks. It's why leveling up specific Borgs is annoying. I'd have to go and change my lineup whenever I want to use them. Or, you know, hope everything before them dies. There's a Borg that I only got a crystal for. Never got to play, but definitely got killed by the cheap fuck on occasion. It's a walking nuke that runs up and detonates, doing enough damage to instantly kill anything I could bring to the table. I mean, the AI can afford to use it. The AI has as much energy as it wants, and units cost less for it, so it's both pointless and lying to you. What I'm saying is, it can afford underhanded sneak attacks. For the player, however, this costs energy. I don't need an ironic nuke. What would be a good place for this in a static lineup? If I could swap to it as needed, however, I could tag out a useful Borg, drop a nuke, and alright, back into the fight I go. I mean, I imagine there would be a cooldown on switching, perhaps another limiter like having to stand still for a few moments, but there are many ways it could be implemented without breaking the game. All allies gain new Borgs over the course of the story, so Mana actually gets worse as she gains mages to supplement her nurses. So if I want healing, I have to hope she gets stomped a couple of times. During all of this training, Kotaro wanders into the plot, immediately to get bullied by Nekabe and Chum. No steps in, shoos the two off, and we devote some plot to training him up. I was expecting him to be the wonder child, what with this introduction, but no, he's just incredibly annoying and uses gunman Borgs. Nothing would change if Kotaro never turned up and got several battles devoted to him. Another Death Borg commander turns up, fat sociopath kid Tama and his airships and satellites.
It's clear how this is going to end.
Over the course of an afternoon, I shoot his Borgs down. This causes him to drop a Death Crystal. I'm immediately worried that I'll have to collect 7 of these. Kakeru hands his crystal over shortly thereafter since he has ninja Borgs and I have good ones. Alright, I've got to complain about the map screen. Early on there are yellow and red signs, occasionally a question mark. At some point, the game forgets about red signs and plot progress becomes not quite a guessing game, but definitely more irritating than it needs to be. If a mission has a unique name, it might be progress. If it's training, it might be progress, depending on where you are in the plot. If it says fight the Death Force, 80% odds it's optional. The time between getting the first Death Crystal and the third and thankfully final was 3 hours. 3 hours of battles that, by this point, had very much lost their luster. I actually remember at some point during the game, not during this period mind you, wondering, is there even a real ending? Like, maybe we've beaten back the main invasion but the Emperor is still out there somewhere, sending Borgs indefinitely for us to push back, the game just ending with an unwinnable war, maybe to be resolved in a sequel. I mean, 10 hours is not even a long game. I've covered longer. It just feels so much longer and more draining than it actually is. I spend most battles just watching the enemy's meter tick down. And as we know, the meter is wrong. Yuji! Yuji is... annoying? Camp? He has one of the only jokes in the game. And, yeah, visual novel format, right guys? I really hate Yuji. His theme is gimmicks. We defeat Sho at the Death Force base and he gives us our third Death Crystal, which belonged to his dad? Okay, where are any of your parents? There are more kids in this game than there are in actual Japan. This point about his dad doesn't go anywhere, and if it does, you'll have to forgive my forgetfulness. We fight our way through some UFOs and up into the Sky Fortress, opened up by said crystals. The decisive battle. Oh good, I don't believe it, but I want to. During this fight with Orochi and the Cosmic Dragon, I figured out I could shoot through walls with G-Force's charge laser. If you think I'm cheating, well, I am. I'll promise you that I could have beaten this battle anyway, albeit I'd have had less fun. We defeat the dragon and surprise, it's a fake-out ending. The Galactic Emperor taunts us and once again, the whole town is flooded. Adults noticed this time, but it's pointed out that only Borgs can defeat Borgs. Which annoyed me, because I was going to make a point about just having the kids grab some baseball bats way back in Hour 1. I was looking forward to making that point in the review, but now I had nothing to look forward to. You know, I have beaten Persona 4 multiple times. It has more than one fake-out ending. I might be remembering wrong, but I think it has 14, and 9 of them happen in a row. Persona 4 is also 3 days long. I really like Persona 4. There are 4 hours between this decisive battle and the actual finale. I'd rather replay Persona 4. Way more battles are fought, the simplistic combat continues to set in. Every problem I have with the game compounds as I just mash directions and B. I clear every battle and several more pop up. I beat those as well. And is this fucking whack-a-mole? One battle has me fighting instant kill laser robots. They take a while to charge up, so it's a test of damage rushing and circle strafing. It's slow and annoying, and I win by doing what I've always been doing, but a bit harder. I fight nuke launchers. and there's an enemy with a cable that holds me in place, making it so I will definitely die. I replay the battle shooting them first. I win a battle with the Death Force nuking themselves out of existence. Several times we've faced the Hero Force. It's a 5-on-1 battle against a group of Sentai heroes. This game is in no way designed for a fight with this many participants, but it's fine. I'll definitely drop at least one enemy per Borg. Battles start blending together, I get turned into a cockroach for too long again. There's a parade of dragons in Mana's house that is the most boring parade I've ever seen, and my parents are Arsenal fans. My thumb becomes a shortened red nub and we proceed. A bunch of gimmick battles, some of which are easy to the point they honestly would have been best served in the early game to give the player a more diverse set of options and promise that there's an eclectic group of enemies in store. I'm fighting Transformers, rolling Spike Ball Knights, really tough seeming stuff, but my strategy has not changed and it's serving me just as well. I have a hero at my beck and call. But he's alright, he's interesting, but he's not that great compared to some of the lads I've had for hours. What was everything else then? Oh, it's a pun. Oh, bugger off. Eventually a dragon turns up to trigger the finale. I've forgotten if there's precedent for this. The Borgs use their energy to grow to a giant size, and hey, this music's pretty good. The battle tracks throughout have been mostly forgettable, but I'm on board for this. It's heroic and suits the grand but still kid-friendly. I don't care anymore. Another easy damage sponge dragon. The Galactic Emperor arrives, hovering above the Earth. The Borgs grow to a concerning size. Each of your allies turn up for one last scene as if we actually had an adventure together. Oh, by the way, I got the fat psychopath on our side because I won all of his optional battles. Huh, well, I guess the Flat Earth lads were right. Shouldn't we all float away? Our centre of gravity is likely way out of... This is a kid's game. The final battle is a bullet-hell bullet sponge shielded by a shield and 4 turrets. I can't really claim victory since I got knocked off of the ship and couldn't navigate my way back up, since my lock-on had me facing directly upwards, and thus I couldn't get back to the teleporter in time. With that, the Borgs decide to remain on Earth, which they will likely tire of. And Orochi is released from the Emperor's mind control. And that is Gotcha Force. Now, for how much I have come away not liking it, I can see why it's a cult classic. I can't get past the combat, however. The sheer number of playable characters from a wide range of classes and archetypes is definitely an interesting premise. It does have spectacle, but it doesn't hold out against repetition and lack of impact. Simple mechanics are not bad in and of themselves, but this feels simple to the point of destroying skill and removing necessary features. This is a game of attrition. I got more energy and could dodge enemies a good portion of the time. The changes I want are not really overhauls, just fixes and things getting tightened up. I was always questioning, was this made to be simple because it's a kid's game? Is it simplistic regardless of that? Before I realised it doesn't matter, it was negatively impacting the game either way. Very few Borgs have defensive measures beyond the dull dodging, and those that do have defensive measures are awkward to use. I'd take the Y button as a block. Fuck super mode. You know, fuck it, make it a parry button and make holding Y activate super mode if you can't let go of that. You don't even need 200 block animations, just one shield effect. The lack of mid-battle Borg switching is entirely bad. There are no interesting gameplay decisions in having a static lineup of units and going into battles mostly blind. It rewards fielding bland, jack-of-all-trade units rather than covering multiple bases with strong, specialised Borgs. This game did have a reprint in 2012. I'm not sure why. It wasn't an updated re-release. Granted, this is a game I could see finding a niche with a modern audience. It found one back then, but now it could have online play. Hell, portable consoles may just have caught up with the technical demands of Gotcha Force. I can see it being a decent fit for the Switch. Overall, however, as a brawler, I think it's too irritating and slightly too challenging for kids, but far too simple and easily gamed by older players. Despite its diversity, it doesn't present interesting scenarios or reward good strategies and unit selection whatsoever. I'm frustrated with this game since it's got a fun and interesting premise, but it seems to try and undermine itself every step of the way. Thanks for listening, this was TehSnakerer. I recently started crowdfunding for these videos on Patreon. If you haven't had a look at my page, please check it out, there's a link in the description. And now, a thank you to all my current patrons. Sweed, DBZ King 119, Erik Nace, and Wagman. Thank you all very much for your donations. For those of you in the $5 bracket, please leave questions and suggestions for the Afterthought video. All of you will be receiving the script and notes for this review. If you started donating in the time since I finished editing this video, I do apologise. Please tell me and I'll leave your name in the description, and I will catch you next time.